listeners to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host, Sana, and today's conversation is one I have been holding very, very close to my heart. Well, we are diving into the hidden cost of raising female people pleasers and how that cultural conditioning intersects with trauma, mental health, and ultimately healing. And my guest today is Linda Feig Knipe, who is the author of the deeply powerful memoir Braving Therapy, Rape, Buried Trauma, and the Triumphant Journey Over PTSD. Now, listeners, Linda is a retired professional school counselor with over 20 years of experience. She is a trauma survivor and a woman whose story is not just one of survival, but of reclaiming wholeness, identity, and joy. Now, if you have, especially speaking to all the women out there, if you have ever felt the pressure to be the good girl, to suppress your voice just to keep that peace, or to carry trauma in silence, this conversation is absolutely for you. So, with that, Linda, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Sana. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Linda, before we talk about the topic, I mean, let's talk about your story. It is filled with moments where you kept going even when your world has been turned upside down. And I want to start with the theme of this episode, people pleasing. So how did being a strong independent woman who never asked for help play into how you buried your trauma for so long?
I will start by saying that um, the book I wrote, Braving Therapy, that's the part that
Mhm.
seems to be resonating with everybody. They don't really even talk about my trauma or experience. They just talk about that, how being people pleasers has inhibited them. So I grew up Um, and I would consider it a privileged childhood, not because we had a lot of money, but we had a lot of love. And I had a lot of siblings. Um, my parents were very loving. I was the oldest daughter. I was the second oldest child, and I was cute and I was helpful, and I was the first girl born into the family. So, that puts you on a pedestal, and
Yep.
it feels really good to be on that pedestal, and it's really tough to maintain that position. So you start really working at being perfect and helpful and taking care of the people around you, because you get um a lot of rewards for that. People praise you and they're proud of you, and so it's uh it's a self-fulfilling position. That it feels good to be on the pedestal, but then you have to work really hard to be the perfect person that you feel deserves being on the pedestal. So that was kind of my upbringing. And my fir and I was very capable. I helped out as much as I could. My first trauma was my grandmother, who lived right across the street, and I was extremely close to, died in a fire when I was 11. And I immediately buried that. I was worried about how my mother was coping with that. And so I didn't talk about my I didn't talk about my feelings, but as a child, I can remember lying in bed at night worried about anything happening to my grandmother. And I kept it to myself, but I think those were the first kind of feelings for 6 months, I was in shock. If I heard a fire engine, I would just break it into a cold sweat. It was really uncomfortable. So that was the first time I really started handling really uncomfortable things by burying it. But I kept on, and I was, I was very helpful and did all of the things, and I would get the rewards of people saying, "Oh, she's so mature." She, when I was just trying to help around the house, especially after she died. So I got lots of praise for being that helpful person. So it's not that I don't even know if it's that other people put it on us. I think that people love us and we kind of um take that as an indication of how we're supposed to behave and what we will get praised for.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that resonates so deeply. And when I trace back to my childhood, yeah, I mean trauma. I may not be able. I mean, fortunately, I didn't experience um parental trauma, but now when gradually I got, you know, in contact with the outer world, it was really a huge realization that dawned upon me, self realization that until now I have been kind of in a cocoon. I was so safe and so guarded that I kind of lost or could not even identify what exactly, how people are, how to interact with them, who are good or who are the bad ones out there. So that was one of the biggest self realization for me, which kind of sometimes, gives me that anxiety of going into a new city or going into a new place that
Yes.
I may not be able to mingle with anyone, or I will be exhibiting that fear of which people will start taking advantage of me.
Hmm. Yeah, I've been wondering about this a lot because I have lovely daughter-in-laws, and over the years, um, we've talked about anxiety and mother anxiety and just woman anxiety of being accomplished and helpful people, but it creates a lot of anxiety. And then on top of it, you start every time. This is an experience I had that I realized talking with students too, who struggled with anxiety or perfectionism, that there's a lot of negative self-talk that if somebody says something even to just correct you or direct you, that you start really every time you see yourself doing something that you feel needs correcting, you're really nasty to yourself. There's, you talk to yourself in ways that nobody on the outside would talk to you.
Yeah.
And and that just starts um a kind of a thought pattern about yourself that, you better shape up, you better take care of other people and just really knocking yourself down.
Exactly.
That I think leads to a lot of, dealing with that depression that creeps up on us. Um, and it's not just women that do that. When I have had author talks and I start talking about this topic of beating yourself up, I'll see a lot of heads nodding and you know the group of people that I'm talking with, and they're usually accomplished people that take care of other people, and they're just nodding about being tough on themselves and not sharing how they're feeling, not talking to other people about what's going on, which is kind of the crux of my book. Um, the keeping it to yourself, keeping it all to yourself, and how uh, damaging that can be to every part of your life, to yourself, to your relationships, to how you operate, because you operate out of a sense of needing to keep control of everything.
Mm. And Linda, talking
Yeah.
about your experience, you have also worked in rural schools because mental health or trauma or healing, I think, I mean, they don't have any boundaries. They don't have any specifications that only this section of society or people they experience this. So
Right.
I've worked in rural schools where you were often the only accessible mental health professional for students. So
Mm.
I notice a- any kind of people pleasing pattern in the girls you worked with. I mean, how do you think, if there is, how do they affect their long-term mental health?
I the benefit of starting to work with students who are a little younger is you would see those patterns, and a lot of times, it was a pattern that was passed down from, throughout their family. Um, and and you're right, you know, um, it passes through all socioeconomic um, s- classes. It doesn't matter. It's just a way of dealing. But the the perfectionist trying to take care of everybody just keeps on regenerating. But the way I would see it is, it would come out in harmful relationships. Like I would be talking with um, girls and young women who felt like it was up to them to handle relationships that they would get into. A lot of times, I don't know why, but a lot of girls are drawn to bad boys because they want to fix them. And it would just get into really um, difficult situations that were really hard um, to help them look at what they were doing, especially at that early age. But y- I could just see that if we weren't able to start talking about what was happening, that this was just going to go on into their adult life of picking bad relationships and doing whatever they felt they needed to do to be able to please their partner and stay in control themselves. So yeah, I think it starts early. I really started understanding about the effects of negative self-talk by working with students, and a lot of times it was the very accomplished, very privileged students who were beating themselves up. So that is across the board a problem.
Yeah, yeah. And then, if I talk about myself as well, um, especially in the context of how society kind of judges you. So in my society or in our culture, um if you, as a girl, if you are, if you fit in that template, and we were talking this right just before the podcast, that if you are saying yes to, and if you comply with those, a checklist or the check boxes,
Yeah.
people will start to know you. People will start to kind of compliment your parents that, you have raised such a good daughter. Your daughter is so well behaved. She's likable. I mean, she's so well put up.
Yeah.
And that, when we are young, it appeals to us. But, in my experience, as when I grew up, I slowly began to realize that's not the actual picture. I'm not the one as per what the society has set up the checklist. I want to be someone who I wish to be.
Yes.
So That's
Yes, it doesn't serve you. And people don't do it to try and control you. I mean, people are genuine in their compliments, but it doesn't serve you to go into your relationships and professional life as someone who's always um, trying to take care of other people's interests and not standing up for your own.
right. Right.
But in um, the other thing that I wanted to so people don't really know you because you're not being honest. I mean, it comes back to us. We're not being honest with who we are. And um, I think for me, and I will say everybody has hard stuff that you have to figure out and get through. That's it's always been my belief that that is the whole purpose of this grand journey of life that we're on, is not to have, you know, a wonderful life that doesn't have problems, but to have a life that has problems, because then that's when you figure out how to grow and become more authentic. But it is not easy. And for me, I had some trauma as a young woman. Um, I was raped, and I buried that just like I always did and went on with life. But it affected even more my need to control how I responded to things and the people around me, and bury how I felt about things and what I said. And it was a long journey to finally learn to talk with other people and reveal my true self, because that's what I think happens is you don't really reveal your true self when you're being a people pleaser. And so for me, it involved I found a very good therapist, and I talk about how to find the right therapist for you, but it took a long, long time of back and forth of struggling to even be real with myself and talk about what I was thinking and feeling, and my perspective about things changed. I feel much stronger and much more uh genuine now after after and it was quite a long time because I was very resistant to talking. But I feel more genuine now about who I am and my self-awareness. My self-awareness has increased tremendously since doing that work. So I think even though I had a trauma that required that I go to therapy eventually, um, it was a very good thing that I was in therapy.
Because you mentioned it very much rightly that I think real resilience it includes asking for support, because we don't heal by pretending that we are invincible. I think it's more about, we heal by honoring our true selves, even when
Yes.
it's like messy and broken.
Yeah, and I'm going to use the word shame because shame is a big reason that we stay quiet.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and it is so hard to overcome shame for yourself that you just want to um you don't want people to see the parts of you that are messy and that you feel like you should have had in control, and so you stay quiet. And the problem I found is that the longer that goes on, the more quiet you become because the more stuff you bury until you kind of don't know what to talk about. It was like what you said about being in the city and being around people and being so uncomfortable and having anxiety about it because you're just kind of afraid to reveal yourself.
Mm. So, so anyway, yeah, Linda, please go on. Go on.
No, I was just going to say that I think one of the best things that my therapist did is, um, there's a therapeutic, stance called unconditional positive regard, and that is to positively positively regard the person that you're talking to, no matter what they say. And it doesn't mean that you agree with their perspective or anything, but it allows people to feel safe enough to talk with you and that you still positively see them as a person. And that, like, eventually starting to internalize that feeling of positive regard for yourself as a person is what happens over the long haul when somebody is always approaching you with positive regard and not really rewarding you for doing people pleasing stuff, but being really rewarding you with positive regard for being vulnerable,
Mm.
which is the lovely part of therapy. It's a very warm feeling to start being able to feel like you can be your true self and start discovering who your true self is and feel that warm acceptance from someone.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Linda, in the interest of time, before we wrap up, um, if our listeners would like to connect with you and explore more and more, just apart from the trauma part or the therapy part, of course, also get a hand of your book, how they can do that.
Okay. Um, I have a website. It's lfeigknipe, .com. And I also am on Facebook, at L period Feig Knipe, is my Facebook page. And my book is on Amazon. The name of the book is Braving, like brave, but Braving Therapy by L. Feig Knipe. And the I will just say about the book that I have had a lot of young women write to me, not just young women, but women write to me about exactly what we just talked about. And that's what
Mhm.
they connected with about the book was just about talking about the things that they don't usually talk about and the people pleasing and trying to create this perfect image of themselves for themselves and other people. And a lot of what I talk about in the book really opened their eyes because from my therapy conversations, I was talking in the book about what I was thinking about and how I was changing, how my perspective was changing and my realization about the same things that we've just talked about.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think that it's a helpful perspective, and nobody talks about the fact that I wrote about my own trauma, which I was very nervous about. They all just talk about how they connect with that whole people pleasing part of it. So, it's available on Amazon, Breathing Therapy by L. Knipe.
Of course. I think that's such an empowering, uh, you know, that must have been really, really difficult yet very empowering, uplifting for you because, for any survivor out there of any trauma or a difficult life event, um, I mean, I cannot mention the exact words, but it's really sometimes, you have to go to the darkest places up there in your subconscious mind or in your memories to write it down, to pen it down. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
really, and, very aptly, that's how the book is named, Braving Therapy.
yeah.
Great. Well, Linda, I'll have all the links mentioned in the show notes for our listeners. And thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much.
I will say too, if anyone would prefer to order, it can be ordered from bookstores. So they don't have to go through Amazon. Okay.
Of course.
It's also available from bookstores.
Lovely. Lovely. So it's
Well,
listeners, and I'll have all the details in the show notes. And for any of our listeners who feel like they are carrying too much on their own, please take this as your sign. You are not alone, and healing is possible. And therapy is not just brave, it is beautiful, it is empowering. And you can refer to the show notes. And also, I highly encourage you to sit with it, reflect, and share it with someone who might need that encouragement today. Until next time, this is your host, Sana. And remember, your healing is your power. Thank you.
thank you.